Funding for this program is made possible by Burke Nursery and Garden Center in Burke, Virginia. You'll find trees and shrubs, perennials and annuals, water garden supplies, houseplants, and bird and gardening supplies. Burke Nursery also provides landscape, plant diagnostic, and installation services, and much more. For more information, you can check out their website or call 703-323-1188. Welcome to Gardening with Burke Nursery, the show where we help you grow your garden and increase the curb appeal of your yard. I'm your host, Misty Kuceris, the horticulturalist at Burke Nursery and Garden Center. One of the trends that I'm seeing in gardening is that more people are purchasing trees to plant in their yard. With this trend also comes one of the most important questions: how do I plant my tree? So today, I'm inviting you to join me on this episode, Planting Your New Tree. Trees are so important in a landscape. They provide shade for the house. They help with water flow around your home. They bring joy into your life, and they increase the value of your property. So let's start today by showing you some of the tools that you'll need. And of course, the first tool that you need will be whatever is your tree or your shrub. And this one here is a little miniature that we'll be using since I actually couldn't bring a large tree or a large shrub into the studio. I did bring one shrub here into the studio, which this one is actually a crepe myrtle, but that's the largest that I could bring into the studio. The other tool that you'll need is you'll need a shovel. And again, we're doing miniatures today on this show since we'll be doing a miniature garden here. The other is always, now you may not care, but I do recommend gloves. And in actuality, I personally prefer gloves that are nitrile gloves because they work a lot better and they protect your hands against chemicals better than the latex gloves. The other is that you'll want a soil amendment. And we'll talk more about the soil amendment in this show. Finally, you'll need some kind of fertilizer. And we'll talk about the different types of fertilizers, but that's important as well. And the most important is watering. So what you want is you want either a regular hose or you want a soaker hose. And a soaker hose is a great thing to have. It is porous. When the water goes through here, then the water will just come out slowly through the actual hose. That's why it's called a soaker hose. Or you may decide that you want what we call a tree gator or a gator bag. And you may have actually seen these. And these are bags that people put around the base of the tree if they can't get a hose out there. So that's important. What you don't really need or want is you don't need what we call a wand that you attach to your hose, because using the wand doesn't really give you enough water into the root ball. The other that you don't want is you don't want one of these either, because that won't work very well. And finally, you don't want your lawn sprinkler system, because this doesn't work very well. This is great for lawns. That's why they call it the lawn sprinkler system. This gets the water down 2 inches, which is what your lawn needs, but it doesn't necessarily get the water down far enough for what your newly planted tree will need. Oh, and forgot one other tool that actually is a very good tool to have. This is a moisture meter. And a moisture meter is a great tool to have because you can pluck it into the root ball of the tree and see whether or not that tree is getting enough moisture. One of the things when you're thinking about planting your tree is to decide what type of tree that you want to purchase. And when you go to the nursery, trees come 3 different ways. One of the ways that they come is they come in what we call a container. And basically a container is a pot. And then the other way that a tree will come is in what we call a B&B. So you see this picture here of dogwood trees, and the further one is in the container, in the pot, and the one that's closer is in a bag and burlap, which we call B&B. And then the third way, which is fairly new, is what we call a root container bag. And this picture that you see is a picture of actually a red bud in a root container bag. Now, it doesn't matter whether you get a plant that comes in a container, whether you get a plant that comes in a B&B, a bag and burlap, or whether you get a plant that comes in one of these root container bags. What it does matter is how you plant and water your new tree or shrub. So let's go into the demonstration. Here is my little garden, all in miniature. And today we'll pretend that this little miniature juniper is actually the tree that we're planting. Now you want to know the size of the container. That means the width of the container. And so here, just to show you, this width of this container is about 4 inches. They never make these so they stay open on me, but this width is about 4 inches. And the hole that I'm going to dig has to be double the size of the container. So the hole in this case has to be a minimum 8 inches. And if you go to 12 inches, that's fine. So this little demonstration that I have here, my little garden, is 16 inches wide. So I'm not going to have any difficulty planting my little tree in this space. The other thing that is critical, and let me just put on my gloves here since I don't like having soil in my hands. The other thing that's critical is to measure the depth of the plant. And so the depth of the plant is not from the top of the pot to the base. It's not from the top of the root container to the base, but rather it's top of the soil line. And success. This one just pulled right out. So here I have the plant that I want to plant, and measuring this is only 3 inches deep. So in my plant, I only want to go down 2 inches deep. What I'm saying is that when you plant any tree or shrub, especially since we're here in Northern Virginia where we have the clay soil, you need to leave 2 inches of that plant above the soil line. So let's plant. Take this out and just put that right there. And so my hole is double the size. And I just brought these little sticks to be able to show you that the hole is double the size here. So it is actually 10 inches. And I'm only going to go 2 inches deep. So when I plant this, I almost forgot to move on to the next important phase. So I have my hole dug. It's dug the right size. And as you'll see, here is the soil that I put aside, right here. And this is what we call the existing soil. Now, a lot of people, what they'll do when they'll plant is they'll take and create the hole, and then they will go and they'll purchase a soil amendment, and they will totally amend that hole. But you don't want to do that, because if you totally amend the hole, what that means is that you'll have a plant that loves being in that space, but the roots of the plant will never grow beyond the hole. So what we want to do is we want to take the existing soil and we want to get a soil amendment. It could be mushroom compost, it could be leaf compost, it can be your own compost, it can be some kind of soil conditioner, and we'll want to add that. So let's pretend this here is soil conditioner, and I'm going to add just a little bit of this soil conditioner to the existing soil, and that means that that's only 25% of that soil conditioner to the existing soil. And I mix that existing soil up. I would do it with my little shovel. And then that soil will be ready to be placed back. So I have my existing soil with my soil amendment here, and still the plant is not quite ready to be put into its little hole. The next step is to get fertilizer. And there's several different types of fertilizer, and I'll be honest with you, any of this fertilizer is good. You can go with what we call a plant starter fertilizer. And the plant starter fertilizer means that the middle number is higher. So that the number in this plant starter fertilizer is 3, 10, 3. Or, I'm from New England originally, and I just really liked my fish fertilizer or my oyster shells or lobster shells, whatever. That also works as a wonderful fertilizer. And then the other is you have the fertilizers that now come with all these extra elements like worm castings or microhesians, and any of those types of fertilizers will work as well. So the key with the fertilizer is to choose the one that you want to use based on where you're living. And that there's not totally a wrong fertilizer. You just need a fertilizer that has that boosting element for your tree and shrub. So the next step that I'm going to do is I am going to put the fertilizer in the hole before I do anything about putting the plant in. If you forget to put the fertilizer down in the hole before you plant, then that's all right. Don't panic, because you can always put the fertilizer back on top of the soil. But it really is important to get that fertilizer down so that the roots will have more nourishment when they start coming out. So the next thing before I plant, there's two things that I'm going to do. One is I am going to check and see if this particular pot container plant is root bound. And if it's root bound, then what I'm going to do is I am going to loosen the roots. And I'm going to loosen the roots either with a knife or my hands. And actually, if it's a very large pot, which most of these are containers, then it's not going to be easy. I would need either to use the shovel or I would need to use a knife to score it. Now I've got the fertilizer down. I'll put the plant in. And again, remember, this is the root ball. We want this to be 2 inches above. And then I'll take the soil that I had on the side that has the soil amendment in it. And this is what I'm going to backfill this with. And there you have the backfilling. So that way, my little plant, or my big tree actually, will have a lot of the existing soil. And yes, it may be clay here in Northern Virginia, but that's what these plants need. They thrive with clay, but the roots also need to be able to come out of the root ball a bit so that you want to give them a little help by putting that soil amendment. And as you can see here, I'm not totally covering that root ball. I'm letting that root ball stay up about 2 inches. The next step is to actually put down mulch. Now, I don't know how well you can see the root ball here for my mulch demonstration. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to use a different little prop symbolizing the actual tree that we've planted. So this little pot is going to symbolize the root ball. We put that in, and the root ball is above. And then this stick here will symbolize the actual stem of the tree or the trunk of the tree. And what you want is you want to take your mulch, you want to put it around the tree and around the root ball. You want to gently cover the root ball. But you don't want that mulch to come within 2 inches of the stem, so, or the trunk, as we might call it. So you need to leave 2 inches, and you don't put down more than 2 inches of mulch. And in actuality, the best is to put that mulch out, if you're planting a tree, at minimum 4 feet out around the tree or further out, especially if you're planting something like a maple tree. The one thing you don't want to do, and I don't know where this came from, but I call these mounds of murder. And this is where you take the mulch and you put the mulch up against the trunk of the tree. If you plant a tree that way, and if you put mulch up on the sides the way that I'm showing you here, this tree will not thrive. The odds of it being dead in 5 to 10 years is extremely high. What happens when you do these mounds of murder, as I like to call them, is that the roots of the tree will grow into the mulch. It won't grow into the soil. See, here, especially in Virginia, which is where most of us are from, we have a lot of clay soil. And so when you have the clay soil, it's difficult, even for oak trees, to get that deep, deep taproot that when I lived in New England, I would see in a lot of my different trees, that deep, deep taproot. Instead, they grow laterally. The roots I'm talking about, not the trees. The trees do grow erect, they grow upright, but the roots will spread. And so you have to give them a safe environment to spread. It's very, very critical. So please never, somewhere along the line, somebody saw that, thought it looked pretty, and suddenly everybody started copying it, and your trees didn't like it. So please never do that. Instead, make sure that your mulch is 2 inches away from the trunk and 2 inches deep, no deeper, and your tree will be happy for the rest of its life with that mulching system. Now, this planting technique and this mulching technique that I showed you is the same whether you're planting a container plant, potted plant, whether you're planting a B&B, or whether you're planting the root container bag. However, there's just a couple things that I wanted to mention. When you get a plant that is in a B&B, a bag and burlap, you don't take it out of the bag. You actually will plant that entire tree with the bag and burlap. What you do take off is you take off any ropes or you take off any wiring that is around the ball of the tree. And then well, I'm from the old school, and in the old school, what we would do after we put that in the hole is we just kind of cut it and drop it almost like you drop a woman drops a skirt, or a man drops a skirt, it doesn't matter. A lot of the burlap now actually disintegrates, and you don't technically have to do that. But keep that in mind with a B&B. Now, the root container bag is almost like a plastic little bag, and you will have to take a knife and slit that bag to cut that bag, and then you will put it in the hole. And then again, the rest of the planting is the same, where you put in the existing soil and you do the mulching exactly the same. And for both the B&B as well as the root container bag plants, again, make sure that root ball is at least 2 inches above the soil line. So finally, the last thing to do, and it doesn't matter which container or B&B or root container bag you had for your plant to start with, the watering is the same. In the beginning of the show, when I was talking, I mentioned the water wand and I mentioned the nozzle. And I said, these are not tools that you want when you're watering your newly planted tree. Instead, what you want is a hose, whether it's a regular hose or a soaker hose. Why? Because your little tree or shrub needs to have the water go down at least 12 inches. And these wands and these nozzles, if you stand there, as one of my friends say, if I can stand here and just use the nozzle this way, and I don't feel any pain in my lower back, then I'm not standing here long enough for that water to get down. Instead, what I recommend is that you take your hose. Don't put a nozzle on it, don't put a wand on it, but take the hose for a newly planted tree or shrub and put it near the root ball. As a matter of fact, I have a picture that you might see it better. And you will put it here near the root ball, and you will leave it there for 1 hour as the water slowly trickles from this hose. Sounds like a lot, but that's how much you need for that water to get down 12 inches. Or, if you prefer, you can use a soaker hose, and if you use a soaker hose, then you can put the soaker hose around the tree or the shrub, and you turn it on and you leave it there for 4 hours. And that water will slowly go down and percolate that 12 inches. It's very critical, especially your first year, but it can take 2 to 3 or 4 years before those roots establish properly. So please water your plants correctly. So as I've mentioned, it can take anywhere from 2 to 3 years or even 4 years for the roots of your tree to establish. For this reason, many organizations, such as the University of Maryland or Texas A&M, recommend that you continue watering your tree for 2 years when the area and the root ball gets dry. As your tree continues to grow and thrive, take time to fertilize it every spring and fall, and make certain that you continue to apply no more than 2 inches of mulch around the tree. If you have any questions about planting trees, or any plants for that matter, contact me at misty@burkenursery.com. I'm your host, Misty Kuceris, and I'd like to thank you for spending your time with me here at Gardening with Burke Nursery. I'm looking forward to helping you grow your garden.
Funding for this program is made possible by Burke Nursery and Garden Center in Burke, Virginia. You'll find trees and shrubs, perennials and annuals, water garden supplies, houseplants, and bird and gardening supplies. Burke Nursery also provides landscape, plant diagnostic, and installation services, and much more. For more information, you can check out their website or call 703-323-1188.